When I was 20, I used to think wisdom was just age plus a good skincare routine. Now, at 52, I know better. Wisdom is knowing how much you don't know and learning to be okay with it. My name is Corinne. I've worked most of my life behind the scenes in a regional theater in Vermont. Lighting design, soundboards, set cues, my version of poetry. The stage was my chapel, and the quiet moments between rehearsals were my prayer. I didn't crave the spotlight. I only wanted to make magic in the shadows. I married Reed when I was 30. He was a playwright, still is, when inspiration finds him between cups of coffee and endless rewrites. Our life has been fine, comfortable, polite. We raised his daughter from a previous marriage, and though we never had kids of our own, I found satisfaction in the quiet rituals of our life. But lately, silence feels less like peace and more like erasure. It was about 3 months ago when Julian moved in. Reed's son from his first marriage, 27, finishing up a graduate fellowship in scenic architecture. He came to stay with us while he worked with a theater company downtown. I remembered him from years back, a sharp-eyed boy with too many questions and a penchant for building tiny worlds from paper and glue. He's taller now, broad-shouldered, hands always stained with graphite or sawdust. His presence feels like standing next to a low-burning fire. You don't realize how cold you've been until you get too close. At first, we orbited politely around each other. I shared pot of coffee in the mornings, the occasional conversation about design theory, or the stubborn Vermont winters. He had an easy laugh, a quick wit, and an uncanny ability to read a room. One Friday night, Reed was out meeting a producer. Julian and I stayed in. I made lentil soup and poured us both glasses of wine. "You ever regret not being on stage yourself?" he asked as we ate by the fireplace, rain tapping the windows gently. I shook my head. The ones who light the scene are just as important as the ones in it. He smiled, slow and thoughtful. "That's a beautiful answer. But I don't believe you." I raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me. I think there's a part of you that wants to be seen. Just once." I laughed, caught off guard. "And what would you know about that?" He didn't look away. "Because I see you." It should have felt strange. It should have made me uncomfortable. But instead, something stirred. Not desire, not exactly. Recognition. The quiet thrill of someone looking at you, not through you. The following week, he invited me to his studio downtown. He was preparing a concept model for a performance installation. "I want your opinion," he said. "You've got an eye." The space was a converted warehouse, lit by hanging Edison bulbs and warmed by mismatched rugs. Julian's models lined the walls, sets in miniature, some whimsical, some aching with implied loss. "You built all these?" I asked, tracing the curve of a tiny velvet chaise in one scene. "I build what I can't say out loud," he replied. Something in the air thickened. He moved beside me, just close enough to feel the heat of him. He smelled like cedar and paint thinner. A memory surfaced of being 19, standing beside a college professor I once adored, wondering if longing could be both innocent and electric. "I want to build a set around someone like you," Julian murmured. "Someone poised, weathered, commanding in silence." "I'm not a character." "No," he said, voice low. "You're a muse." That night, I lay awake next to Reed, the rhythm of our breathing no longer aligned. I thought of Julian's hands, rough and deliberate, arranging miniature trees. I thought of the way his gaze settled on me, like he was memorizing something unfinished. And I knew something had begun, something I couldn't name yet. But it was real. Julian didn't say anything the next morning. He made coffee as usual, French press, black as always, and left a slice of pear tart on the counter for me, the same one he'd seen me eyeing at the farmer's market the week before. It was a small thing, easily brushed off, but my name, written in graphite on a post-it stuck to the cling wrap, sent a tremor down my spine. Corinne. Just my name. No smiley face. No note. Just an offering. I didn't eat the tart. I carried it with me to the theater and set it on my lighting console. It felt absurdly precious. Over the next few weeks, things shifted. Julian began helping me with my cues, offering to run lighting simulations while I directed the interns. He had a sharp visual sense, clean lines, intuitive choices. We worked side by side in long silences that weren't awkward, but humming with something else. Once, during a late tech run, he pointed out a cue change that improved a scene's emotional arc. "You feel everything, don't you?" I said, genuinely impressed. He shrugged. "I notice things, especially things that don't get noticed." I nodded, eyes still on the stage. "That's a good way to go mad." He smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to stay awake." We didn't speak about that moment again. But after that, our glances lengthened. His hand would sometimes rest just a little too long beside mine on the console. Once, during a long blackout while we waited for the director to make a call, his arm brushed against mine and stayed there. Neither of us moved, but neither of us acknowledged it either. Then came the night of the gala. Reed was supposed to attend with me, but a last-minute rewrite deadline had him locked away in his study, apologizing through a closed door. I stood there in a black silk dress I hadn't worn in years, wondering if it still fit my life. Julian stepped into the hallway, adjusting the collar of his slate gray shirt. "Reed's not coming?" "No," I said, exhaling. Surprise of the century. He studied me quietly. "You look—" His words faltered, and I saw his throat work as he swallowed. "I look what?" "Unreal," he finished, voice low. I didn't answer. I just turned and walked toward the front door. He followed. At the gala, the room pulsed with soft music and expensive lighting. We were seated at a table near the stage, not far from the managing director and his latest girlfriend. Julian leaned close throughout the night, whispering dry jokes in my ear during speeches, making me laugh too loudly more than once. His hand brushed my shoulder when he reached for the wine. I didn't flinch. It was during the final toast that I felt it, his hand resting lightly at the small of my back. Not possessive, not flirtatious, just there. A quiet question. I didn't answer it. Not out loud. But I didn't move away either. On the drive home, the car was quiet. The road stretched ahead, empty and silver-lit. He was driving Reed's second car, the old Saab with the loose gear shift. "You shouldn't have come with me," I said finally, breaking the silence. He didn't look over. "Do you regret it?" I stared out the window. "No, that's the problem." When we got home, the house was dark except for the blue glow under Reed's office door. I turned to Julian in the foyer. He stood still, his keys dangling in his hand, eyes unreadable. "I'll head upstairs," I said, my voice too steady. He nodded, but as I turned to leave, he spoke. "Corinne." I looked back. His voice was quiet. "I didn't mean to make anything complicated." "You didn't." He exhaled. "You see me. I see you. That's all." That night I lay in bed wide awake, the soft thrum of Reed's typing the only sound in the house. I pressed my fingers to my lips, remembering the way Julian had looked at me across candlelight, as if I were a story he'd always wanted to tell. And I realized I hadn't felt seen in years. Not like that. Not like a woman with layers and edges and heat. It was subtle at first. A shift in light. A longer silence. A pause between breaths. Julian and I continued to work together at the theater. We pretended nothing had changed, and maybe it hadn't, not technically. But I could feel it. So could he. It was in the way he stood a little closer behind me when we reviewed lighting cues. In the way our conversations drifted too easily into late hours, into confessions that belonged to no one else but us. "I was always drawn to ruins," he said one evening, sitting across from me on the paint-stained couch in the break room. "Not because they're broken, because they carry memory like muscle. You can see the past in the way they fall." I stared at him. That's the most beautiful reason I've ever heard to love something unfinished. He smiled. "You'd be surprised how much strength there is in the undone." The air felt too tight after that. I left early. The next afternoon, Julian asked if I'd review his latest scenic model for a touring production. I told him to bring it by the house. Reed was out. A conference in Portland. 3 days. When Julian arrived, he brought not just the model, but a bottle of wine and takeout from my favorite Thai place. We sat in the dining room, the table still scattered with papers and broken pencils from my last design session. We ate slowly, talked even slower. When he unwrapped the model, an intricate reconstruction of a crumbling 19th century manor, I felt my breath catch. "It's not finished," he said. Good, I replied. Leave it that way. He looked at me then, long and steady, the way people look when they're memorizing something just in case it disappears. After dinner, I walked him to the door. It was late. The house had settled into its familiar creaks. The silence between us thickened. I should go, he said. I nodded, but I didn't move. He took a breath. Do you ever wonder what this would feel like if we weren't who we are? Yes, I whispered. All the time. He reached out, almost instinctively, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. His fingers lingered there. It was just a touch, but it felt like the earth tilting. I can't stay, he said. I know. He left, and I stood in the foyer for a long time, unsure whether I wanted to scream or cry. Maybe both. The next few days, we didn't speak. At the theater, we kept our distance. I immersed myself in work, notes, wires, gels. But I felt it, his eyes tracking me across the room. Not possessive, just waiting. Then one evening it rained. A full, relentless downpour that blurred the world into a watercolor. The power flickered at the theater, then went out completely. The director called the night early. Most of the crew trickled out, laughing and soggy. Julian lingered. You need a ride, he asked, already soaked through his hoodie. I have my car. Still, he said. Let me follow you. Roads flood fast. I didn't argue. By the time we got home, the wind had turned brutal. Branches snapped. Lights flashed. We rushed inside, laughing from the sudden storm, shaking off water like stray dogs. Let me grab towels, I said. He followed me upstairs before I could stop him. I handed him a spare towel from the linen closet. He stood in the hallway, dripping onto the wood floor, towel around his neck. Reed still in Portland? I nodded. He stepped forward. Julian. I'm not going to touch you, he said, his voice tight. I swear. I need to be near you for a minute. That's all. So I let him. We sat on the edge of the bed, shoulder to shoulder, watching the window flash with lightning. Neither of us spoke. Eventually, he turned to me, voice barely audible. You make me feel like I belong in my own skin. I swallowed hard. You make me remember I have one. And then, without thinking, I reached out and took his hand. Just his hand. We sat there like that for nearly an hour. No kiss. No rush. Just fingers intertwined, like we were holding something invisible between us. Something too delicate to name. When the lights flickered back on, he stood. I should go. I nodded. But before he left, he turned back. If I stay much longer, he said, I won't be able to keep not touching you. I met his gaze. Then go. And he did, leaving the scent of rain and sawdust behind, leaving me holding both my breath and a truth I could no longer ignore. The first day Reed returned from Portland, the house felt too quiet. He greeted me with a distracted kiss on the cheek and a stack of unread emails. How was the conference? I asked. He didn't look up from his phone. Crowded. Long. I'll fill you in later, okay? I nodded. I wasn't angry. Just done trying. That week, Julian and I didn't speak. We passed one another backstage, polite, but distant, our movements careful. Professional. Like strangers in a shared dream, neither of us could admit to remembering. It was almost a relief. Until the day I found a small envelope in my lighting booth. No name, just a folded sketch inside. A tiny pencil drawing of a woman standing in front of a darkened stage, the light behind her like a halo. Her hands were empty, but she was glowing. I knew who had drawn it. There were no words, but there didn't need to be. That night, I sat in the dark, turning the paper over and over in my hands. I thought of Julian's voice, steady and quiet. You make me feel like I belong in my own skin. I thought of Reed, still in his study. And I thought of the strange ache in my chest that had lived with me for so many years. I'd forgotten it wasn't supposed to be there. Spring came slowly. The snow melted from the edges first, curbs, rooftops, then trees. The city turned pale and wet, like it had just woken up from something long and dreamless. I didn't go to the theater for a week. I claimed a sinus infection. I needed the space. But on the 8th day, I drove down to the waterfront instead of the office. I didn't tell Reed. I didn't tell Julian. I just sat on a bench overlooking the river, the sketch in my coat pocket. There's a moment in the theater, right before the curtain rises. A breath. A hush. The weight of something about to be born. I'd always lived in that moment. Now I wasn't sure what would come after it. Julian came by the house one afternoon, unannounced. I heard the knock and opened the door before I could second guess it. He didn't say hello. Just, I've been trying to stay away. I thought it was the right thing. I stood silent. I think about you every time I start a new design, he continued. Not in some grand, tragic way. Just like you're the pulse under it. I exhaled slowly. That's not nothing. No, it's not. He looked down at the porch, then back at me. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. Then he turned and walked away. And I let him. Weeks passed. The play opened. Reed's latest script landed a spot in a New England showcase. Julian's name started appearing in more and more credits, usually at the bottom of the poster in that quiet place where the builders live. The unglorified. The essential. We didn't talk often, but I kept his drawing folded in my wallet. A private relic. Something I touched without looking at when the world felt too gray. And then one morning, I found a letter from Reed on the kitchen table. 3 paragraphs, neatly typed. He was leaving. Not angrily, not abruptly, just leaving. I think we both stopped being married a long time ago, he wrote. I want to be honest with both of us, finally. I hope you find whatever it is that still makes your hands shake a little. I hope I do too. I read it twice. Then I made tea. No tears. No music. Just silence. And peace. Julian and I didn't rush into anything. We didn't declare ourselves. We didn't fall into bed. Instead, we found places where the noise thinned. Coffee shops with dusty bookshelves. Small town galleries with too much space and too little funding. Parks with uneven benches. He always sat close. Not too close. Just enough. We never labeled it. There was no need. What we had was a flicker. And flickers, when protected, become fire. A year later, we stood together at the edge of a new set he'd designed, an experimental open-air stage that mimicked a forest clearing. It was breathtaking, and strange, and full of empty space begging for light. I want you to light this one, he said. I don't do stage work anymore, I replied, only half truthfully. He smiled. Do it anyway. So I did. And on opening night, as the crowd settled into the dusk and the first cue came through my headset, I reached forward and pushed the slider. Light bloomed, not loudly, just enough to show what had been hidden. Julian stood in the wings, watching the stage, not me. And that somehow meant more. He didn't need to look at me. He already saw me,